Yo, what's up? This is Jade Dennis, and we're back with another ranked and reviewed. And today we are doing Motionless in White, and I'm recording this at 9 o'clock at night on Friday, June 24th. And what a perfect day in American history to do a band that's got horror elements to them. Because we kind of live in a horror movie right now with this hellish American landscape we live in, where we strip women of their bodily autonomy, courtesy of the Federalist Society. And hey, if you came to this YouTube channel to listen to Jay Dennis just talk about music and not talk about politics, well, guess what? You're on the wrong channel. Because a lot of these bands that I talk about do talk about social justice and political movements, and they are largely on the left. So if you don't like it, too bad. But let's go ahead and get into the substance, the music. And hey, what was it? 57 ranked and reviewed videos before I kind of hinted at what my political leanings were. Well, cool. If you don't like them, I don't give a shit. So let's go ahead. I've been listening to Motionless. I've been listening to Motionless in White since 2010, kind of on again, off again. And they did just put out a new album a week or two today, Scoring Into the World. So much like my last video of Bleed From Within, releasing one of these videos on the heels of a release of a band that I haven't listened to in quite a while, but I'm actually happy to have revisited these guys, because through 6 releases, they've been largely consistent, really good. And aside from one kind of two-way tie at the bottom, it was actually pretty easy to rank these albums. So really glad, once again, like with pretty much all these bands that I've done, to get reacquainted with some albums that I haven't listened to in a long time, or listen to them for the first time. So be sure to, subscribe, comment below what you agree or disagree with as I do these, and let's go ahead and get into it. The ranking of their 6 albums from 2010 all the way up until just a few weeks ago, and then I'm going to top it off with my top 10 at the end. Top 10 favorite tracks, that is. So, at the number 6 spot, we have their 4th album from 2017, Graveyard Shift. I don't know. I probably should have said this before I got into the ranking, but Motionless in White have largely had a pretty consistent sound. Like I said, they've kind of dabbled between like some metalcore, some gothic horror, gothic metal, a little bit of death elements, and even a little bit of, just a teeny bit of new metal elements, which I love. Graveyard Shift is just kind of a flat album, even though like all their albums are technically good and worth listening to. This is the one I have the hardest time listening to from front to back. I'm not really a huge fan of the first couple tracks. It's not until the song Soft that I really start to like it. I like the latter also. And the closing track, which is one of their best songs actually, Eternally Yours, I just love the melody in that song. They do a great job. But I just feel like they had some missed opportunities on this album. I feel like the quality definitely fell flat. They might have been trying to, again, dabble in the new metal sound a little bit that started to creep back up during the middle of the 2010s, to the point where they had Jonathan Davis of Korn on Necessary Evil. But that song is not great. And as amazing as a vocalist as Jonathan Davis is, yeah, he's kind of the high point of the song, but I don't know, it's just not a great song. To kind of say I'm gonna have my cake and fucking eat it too between like the verses and the choruses is just kind of a weird anticlimactic transition. The song 570 is a pretty decent enough single, and the problem with Motionless in White is because they lean so hard sometimes into the horror element. He kind of like leans into like that Marilyn Manson style of singing, which sometimes he pulls off. Chris is an excellent vocalist, by the way, doing all these different techniques. But the horror elements, not just with the technique, but also the themes of the lyrics, are a little corny at times. So songs like Loud really drag the album down. And I don't even have to go that far into this ranking to tell you that even bands like Breaking Benjamin have a huge influence on this band, to the point where Chris sounds like Ben from Breaking Benjamin sometimes, the way he sings and the way that they write some of their songs. They got some of those big, powerful drop A sharp anthems with like that alternative metal sound in songs like Voices, but it sounds like, kind of Breaking Benjamin light, kind of knock off a little bit. But again, couple good tracks, Soft, Ladder, and of course a great song like Eternal Years. Awesome closing. But some of their weakest materials on this album, like again, Loud, and my least favorite song from them, Not My Type, just not great material, and it drags it down. Next up at the number 5 spot, which is just technically tied but just marginally better, is their newest album, Scoring Into the World, which is great because first impression, I was largely not into this album except for like a couple of tracks. There are no bad albums from front to back or weak albums from front to back, but just kind of different strokes, different folks kind of deals. There's always at least a handful of solid tracks on every album, but Scoring Into the World just kind of sounded like butt rock at first to me, kind of like weak sellout stuff with just trying to get some radio hits with like the first, I think 4 tracks: Meltdown, Sign of Life, Werewolf, another corny song, and Porcelain. And then eventually it gets heavy with Slaughterhouse. You got the best track on the album, Masterpiece, which is the leading single, which actually does sound like a fucking solid Motionless in White meets Breaking Benjamin, like Diary of Jane sounding material. Like, that's a awesome song. So is Cause of Death and Burned at Both Ends Part 2. But again, this album is marginally better, but it's not much better at all than Graveyard Shift for the same reasons. It's got a handful of corny tracks on there, and it's just a little bit more consistent, I guess. But it did sound better on the second and third listen, so it is a grower of an album, but I don't think it's going to grow enough on me to rank higher up than the newer albums. So yes, they still got some of the heavy stuff, but Motionless in White is very much doing a lot of the more clean vocals, more like, I guess, hard rock, radio metal kind of sounds with like Porcelain. Like I said, Werewolf is kind of a corny song. I'm just trying to think, is there anything else I'm missing here? But like I said, the thrash is still there. Oh yeah, Red, White, Boom, another corny song. But I do enjoy the closing track as well. Anyway, so not a whole lot to say about those bottom 2 albums that are tied. But let's go ahead and get into the number 4 spot, which is their 2014 release, album number 3, Reincarnate. Kind of a similar deal to the bottom 2 albums, where like probably not an album that I'm ever going to listen to again from start to finish, but just the aggregate songs as a whole are just better, but not entirely great. You got solid songs like Dark Passenger. Best song on the album is Wasp, which is like a 7-minute song, but it's really well written, and I really enjoy it. You got thrashy tracks like Unstoppable. Break the Cycle is a great song. This is probably going to be the album that I have the least amount to say about it. It's just kind of forgettable, but like the high points and the low points are both high and low respectively enough to like outweigh the bottom 2 albums. But this is the one that I probably had the least amount to say. It's just kind of like that awkward middle album in their career that isn't some of their best material or some of their worst material ever. Just, I don't know whether or not to call it an identity crisis, but again, aside from a handful of tracks that I really enjoy, out of the 13 tracks, I'd probably skip about half of them. But the quality of music that these guys put out, regardless, the vocals and the music are still solid enough to where all the albums are still technically great on some level. And this one's just a little bit greater, which is why it sits at the number 4 spot. Number 3, we have their 2019 release, Disguise. And from here on up, this is where we're getting to like the really high quality material. I think Disguise definitely took the new metal shit and really took it to the next level, especially with like the industrial, the techno, mostly industrial sounds. Disguise is just way better. Already a much better album than like the first three that I've already talked about. Firing on all cylinders with the first 4 tracks, you know, the title track, Headache. Top tracks are tracks 3 and 4, which are Code, and then Thoughts and Prayers. Undead Ahead 2 is awesome. Another Life, which is like their most popular song on Spotify for some reason. Solid track, not one of their best, but still solid. Definitely a good single. And then Brand New Numb, and then Catharsis. The only tracks that I would really skip are Legacy and Broadcasting from Beyond the Grave. But this album pretty much gets like an 8.4 out of 10. It's pretty solid from front to back, but most of the greatness is in the front part, a little laggy in the middle, I guess, and then it's just a solid Motionless in White album. It's heavy, it's got great songs, it's got great hooks, and I think if they were to have like any new metal album, not like an entire album, but like where if you know somebody were to speculate, oh, this band dabbled in that new metal material that came back and got popular again, which my band Raptor Riot in the Sabotage EP, go on my channel and look it up. Came out in 2016, 2K16, homie. I played a huge role in the local scene and on Instagram on making all these bigger bands want to be new metal. So if you want to say thank you to Motionless in White and all these other bands that were part of the new metal revival on some level, or they took, you know, homage, be sure to remember which channel you're currently listening to and who planted the seeds. Excuse me. Anyway, let's continue. All right. Now that we just finished talking about another great album, let's get into their top 2 albums, their best albums. At the number 2 spot, we have their second album, Infamous, which, thank God, because, like I said, most of the time that I was listening to this band originally were in the early 2010s, their first 2 albums. I must have downloaded or torrented a bad quality version of this album because I sometimes bands go into the studio when they do a bad job, not with like writing music or anything, but like just sonically the album sounds like shit. Turns out I just probably downloaded a bad version of the album. So now I got a whole new opportunity to listen to this album properly and realize, holy shit, Infamous is awesome. It aged really well. It is a solid follow-up to what is clearly their best album. But let's keep talking about it. You got some of their heaviest material on there. You got them going in the fucking drop A with like Devil's Night, which sounds incredible still. A song that I've enjoyed for like 10 years now. This album came out in 2012 after all. Burned at Both Ends, part 1 is awesome. One of my favorite tracks from back then was The Divine Infection. It's not one of my top 10 favorite Motionless in White tracks, but it's still a song that aged pretty well. You got Puppets 2. There's a lot of sequel tracks in their discography, by the way. They don't just write one song and they're done. There's always like a part 1 or a part 2, or I think there's like fucking 3 parts to like their song Puppets. Anyway, Cinematic, best song on the album. Love that evil sounding industrial goth ballad. Definitely one of their best songs. And if you've listened to material off their first 2 albums, you're thinking, damn, Motionless in White's definitely got some like bleeding through elements to it. It sounds like a little bit like Brandon Shapetti and like Bleeding Through, like this thrashy metalcore like material that's just really fast. Well, guess what? They finally fucking feature him as a guest vocalist on If It's Dead We'll Kill It, which is a solid track. And then they kind of tease what might be coming in a couple of years. I don't know if they did this on purpose or not, but maybe they've just always had a little bit of new metal influence on their music. But a song that I've slept on all this time and is now one of my favorite tracks from them, it's called Hate Fuck. And I just love that raunchy-ass guitar riff. That is a tasty riff. That is a catchy kind of like new metal, alternative, almost like 90s sound that I really enjoy. And then the closing track, Infamous, the way he sounds, he's definitely trying to like embody or like, you know, give homage or give like, and you know, tilt his hat, whatever the expression is, to Jonathan Davis. It sounds like he's trying to sound like Jonathan Davis in that song. Only songs I didn't much care for were America. You know, I don't much care for America right now either, because our, you know, Supreme Court, or as I call them, SCROTUS, you know, really fucking chupos mis huevos right now. We really need to pack the course, guys. We need to fight back against this tyranny. So yeah, Infamous is awesome, and I just found out that Jason Sukoff also produced it, so no fucking wonder it's awesome. Jason Sukoff is one of the best metal producers, especially like in the 2000s and now in like the 2010s as well. He produced one of my favorite albums of all time, Chimera's Resurrection album, and he's obviously touched a lot of insanely good work. So Infamous at number 2, but now that only leaves one album left, which is their first album, which is, you know, from what I understand, the fan favorite for a lot. And that's Creatures. This is the album that, of course, got me into them back then. And to this day, it's still easily their best album. I don't know if it's because they just relied solely on one theme. There wasn't really an identity crisis with this album, but it's just executed so well. And just for the time that it came out, and just how potent and powerful it was for the time, it's just aged really well. It's not one of those bands that I listened to back then and I'm kind of tired of now. It still hits hard. Some of their best materials on this album, songs that I enjoyed a shit ton back then, I still enjoy today. We Only Come Out at Night, Abigail, which I forgot that Nick from It Dies Today is on that song. I fucking love Nick, and I love It Dies Today. Be sure to check out my ranked and reviewed of It Dies Today's vast three album discography. So I love that he's on that song. Abigail is fucking awesome. It's so heavy. The vocals are disgusting. And my most favorite track from this band, excuse me, is on this album. It's called Cobwebs. Nasty drop A sharp riffs, insanely good chorus with great melodies, with intensely chugging guitar riffs behind it, and most importantly, just that alternative style melody. That the key that it's in, A sharp minor, and just like I said, the lead guitar work between the chuggy guitar riffs of the chorus, the verses. It's just all in all an insanely good song. Best song to this day. City Lights is a solid ballad, and I think it's going to showcase what they can do on future albums, like with Cinematic. Puppets, it's got that bleeding through sound to it, which I really enjoy. Scissor Hands is a great closing track. There's just really no weak tracks on this album either. I don't have a whole lot to say about the other tracks, like Undead Ahead or .com Part 2 or London in Terror. You know, just a couple of drop C, kind of decent enough songs relative to the rest, but they're good. They're not weak tracks by any means. They're not weak like some of the tracks off of the lower albums. Immaculate Misconception, by the way, the opening track, just disgusting chugs, just really showcases how fucking heavy and powerful this album's going to be, with some really gross lyrics that really I don't know if it's slut shaming or what, but it just kind of shows how brutal this band can be. But yeah, Creatures was their best album, hands down. Still is to this day. Kind of easy to see why it's still a fan favorite. But let's recap real quick. Bottom 2, again, roughly tied, but the bottom spot, Graveyard Shift. Then newest album, Scoring the End of the World. Reincarnate, Disguise, Infamous, and then Creatures. And my top 10 tracks from Motionless in White are Thoughts and Prayers, okay, Code, Hate Fuck, Masterpiece, Devil's Night, Eternally Yours, We Only Come Out at Night, Cinematic, Abigail, and Cobwebs. So it doesn't hurt that Creatures has some sentimental value to it, and that it was an album that I listened to during some good in some challenging times, but 2010 was a great year. But I just think, musically speaking, and then just for that being their first release, I just think that quality at that time, great job. Every album is worth listening to at least once from start to finish. If you like the lighter stuff, maybe you don't listen to Creatures first. Maybe listen to their newest album first. If you kind of want a decent mix of everything, listen to Infamous or maybe Disguise. But like I said, every album is worth listening to, so be sure to comment what you agree or disagree with. How would you rank them differently? Why the fuck am I wrong? Why does my ranking suck, bro? How dare you put their newer album towards the bottom? Guys, I do my best. I do my best to not placate to my audience. I'm just giving you guys my opinion. But I do get a little bit of heat, which I expect on some videos about some rankings I do. But I'm pretty honest and blunt about why I feel the way. But some bands are just challenging to do. And, like, I'm not saying any of these albums suck. It's just I prefer what they did on certain eras. And if I'm looking at it objectively, sometimes certain elements of an album are executed and produced better, whether it's the sound or whether it's the technique or the style that they're going for. But hey, there's also that layer of subjectivity in there also. So again, comment. That's my time, guys. I'll catch you on the next one. Peace!